Give a round of applause and welcome.
Wow, thank you guys. This is amazing. So, does everybody know Z in the room? You guys know Z? I have to say thank you to Z because Z is a pretty tough cookie. But he did me a favor today and he invited me during lunchtime, which has to be your favorite part of the day, right? So he kind of set me up for a good time. So I'm excited just to hang out with you guys and share a little bit about my story. Is everyone here homeschooled? Yeah, that's why we're here, right? I'm going to just tell you, she said I'm a famous patriot, which is funny, but I am a patriot, that's for sure. And so I'm very passionate about our country, about America, and what this flag represents. And I'm telling you right now that I truly believe that the secret to saving America is homeschooling your kids. So, yeah, you can clap for that. And I really mean that. So I'm very, very glad that you guys are here and that your parents are investing in your lives and making this possible for you. So my name is John Strand, patriot for Congress, but my story is not really so much about politics. The story of my life has really been about what happens when you decide that truth is more important than being comfortable, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about, right? And does anybody in the room know anything about me other than I'm a patriot? Any interesting facts or have you heard anything about what's been going on in my life? I've had a very interesting life story. Yeah, go ahead. Throw anything out.
Like you were at like some court thing.
A court thing? Okay, that's good.
They asked you like not say the truth or something.
Yes. Wow.
You go to prison for like a year.
Okay. I don't know if you guys heard him, but he said that some of you know that I went to prison because I wouldn't tell a lie and I refused to betray the truth. So you guys know more than I even thought maybe you did. That's awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
What was the lie and what was the truth?
That's a great question. So I'll tell my story and then that'll kind of come across. But before I talk about the prison part, I want to talk a little bit about kind of where I came from in the homeschooling part, because that is a big reason that the things happened to me that they did. So I grew up in a pretty big family. I'm one of 6 kids. I have like 40 first cousins, big Italian family. And I wasn't homeschooled at first. I was born in California, so my dad was in the US Navy. So we traveled around the country and lived in different places. My brother was actually born here in Florida, and other siblings in other places. But I went to a traditional school in kindergarten and first grade, and even as I was about to get into second grade, my mom and dad moved across the country and decided they kind of wanted to take a different approach to raising their family, but they didn't know what homeschooling was at the time. They just knew that they wanted to be really thoughtful and intentional about what their kids were growing up around and kind of the family life that they wanted to give to their kids. So this is a famous story in my family, but I was in second grade and my dad walked into a college bookstore and went to the shelf that had teaching materials. So he thought, oh, okay, well, this is what teachers are using to teach kids in school. And he picked up a book and just started skimming through it, and he was horrified at what was in that book. And he put it down and picked up the next one. He went down the whole shelf, and all of those books that were supposed to be the materials for teaching kids were full of, how do we say? Junk, yeah. We call it woke today. That's a famous word that you've probably heard. But basically a bunch of stuff that tries to convince you that God isn't real, the Bible isn't trustworthy, that maybe your parents aren't even trustworthy, that kind of stuff. And my dad realized, if we put our kids into a regular school and this is the stuff that they're using to teach them, these kids are not going to come out very good. So my mom and dad found another book somehow that talked about homeschooling, and they'd never heard of this before, but they thought, well, gosh, let's maybe give this a try. So they tried it, and we just loved it. My parents loved it, I loved it, and like I said, I'd gone to a regular school before, and I didn't dislike that. Although I did start to get in trouble because I had a lot of energy, and I got done with my assignment really fast, and then I was bored because there wasn't enough work to do in the class, and then I started getting in trouble, and the punishment for getting in trouble was they took away my recess. Which was what I needed the most, because I was an energetic boy and I needed to run around and burn off steam. So, do you guys get recess and play sports?
I do.
I hope so.
I do 3 hours a day of soccer.
Amazing! Soccer is awesome. I was in gymnastics, I played basketball and swimming and tennis. I want to play more tennis in Florida.
I do hockey.
Hockey? That's impressive. That's kind of hard to do in Florida. it's pretty warm here most of the time. So, but yeah, sports are amazing. I learned a lot of important things playing sports. So I encourage you guys to do that for sure. But that was a big turning point in my life, and it's like about 2nd grade when my parents started homeschooling me, and we never looked back. So I homeschooled the rest of my time as a kid and young adult. I basically went to a junior college to finish up my last year of high school homeschooling. And then my life got really interesting because my dad is a mechanical engineer, and he's very smart and into computers and science. My mom had a background in English and theater, and so she was artistic, but there was a good mix for me. And I liked math and science, and I started to like politics and government and that kind of stuff. I learned about American history and the founding fathers and how this amazing country was founded. And I also learned a lot about the Bible, of course. My mom and dad are Christians and raised me to understand the importance of faith and having, not just knowing the Bible and reading it, but understanding that the Bible is a love letter from God, and that God is a person, kind of like you and I are, and mom and dad is. Like they have a name, and they have a character, like they have a personality, and God is like that too. And so the Bible is His love letter to us. It's a long letter, there's a lot in there, but it's a really amazing book and story, and it's amazing. So I was very blessed, of course, to have a mom and dad that loved me, that stayed married and worked hard to keep their family together, and then worked even harder to homeschool me, because that took a lot of work and sacrifice. And it's so valuable. So it gave me an opportunity to learn about the importance of relationships. If you guys remember anything from my talk today, I would encourage you to remember this. My dad told me more times than I could count growing up as a kid that it's very easy to get excited about all the things you're doing in your classes and sports and starting to meet people and what are you going to be when you grow up, and then you get a job and you start working, you start doing all these things, and you get busy. And just ask your mom and dad, are you busy? They're obviously very busy, right? But you can lose track of what's really important in life. And my dad told me over and over that what's really important are your relationships. And that's really stuck with me. So being homeschooled gave me a really cool opportunity to develop relationships, first with my mom and dad. It's the most important relationships you have, because it's what God gives you to start with. And the relationship that you have with your mom and dad is going to really develop who you are as a person and who you become as you get older and become an adult. And hopefully have your own kids and raise them and make friends and relationships all over the world. But that relationship with your mom and dad is so, so important and valuable. And I'm so blessed and thankful that I have a mom and dad that love me and that spent time with me and really made that a priority. So that was a really amazing environment for me. I think you guys probably relate to some of these things, right? Because you are homeschooled, which I'm so excited that that's the case. And there's a lot more to do and to talk about homeschooling and the importance of education and how we handle that as families and how we handle that as a community and how we handle that as a nation when it comes to patriotism and politics and some of those other things that I'm now getting involved in. But I was never involved in politics throughout most of my life. I was like you guys, I loved sports and I loved history and learning, and I love my family. I love church. It sounds like you guys have an awesome church here that's a part of your school, which is, I think, the best way to do it. So yeah, when I was a kid growing up, I loved all of those things. I loved music too. And I started playing the piano and then singing and then writing songs and got into a rock band, and I started leading worship at a couple churches. And so that actually became a really big part of my life. And I eventually decided I was going to be a professional artist. I decided this when I was like 12 years old, actually. But it was only because of homeschooling that I had the opportunity to even imagine that I could be a professional artist and try to make a career as a whole bunch of things. I eventually became a musician, like I was saying, an actor, a model, a director, a writer, all kinds of very interesting things. And it's really homeschooling and also the strong relationship that I have with my mom and dad and the family relationship that we had growing up. That's the reason I was able to have the freedom to explore a lot of different ideas and find what is it that God's designed for me and what my purpose is. And that's another thing I wanted to mention to you guys today, that you're in school, and that's good, and that's very important. But of course, school and learning is a lot more than just learning and memorizing facts, right? You got to start there. That's an important foundation. But the bigger picture of what you guys are doing in school is developing character, like learning who you are, who God designed you to be, and then working to build that. It's like you're building a house out of your life. One of, I think, the most important verses in the Bible, Jesus talks about, if you read the Bible and if you understand what God is saying in his love letter to you, and you take it to heart, and you continue to read it and learn it and apply it in your life, like what God says in his word in the Bible, that's like building your life house on a solid rock. And then when the rainstorms come, like today, and that's a metaphor, like it rains in the physical world, but like in your life as you get older, you're going to have storms in your life, hard, difficult things that happen that you won't know that they're happening. They won't be predictable. Like, I had no idea it was going to start raining like this today. It came out of nowhere. But yeah, if you build your life house on a solid rock, it stays standing when the rainstorms come, when the troubles come, when the hard, difficult circumstances come in your life. But if you don't, it's like building a house on sand, like on the beach, and then the hurricane comes and it's bad news. So that's an important thing to think about when you're in school, that you're not just learning facts, you're learning how to think, and you're learning who God designed you to be and who he's called you to be. So those are important things that you got. I know you guys are working on those now. I'm excited about that, and just encourage you to be excited about the future that you have and what God's called you to. So in my story, I did those interesting things, working on music and acting and all that kind of stuff. And then something very interesting happened. Do you guys remember in 2020? What happened in 2020 that was unusual? Yeah, go ahead.
COVID-19.
Yeah. COVID. And I am guessing that everyone in this room is mostly living here in Florida, has lived in Florida for a while or all of your life. Do you have anyone that moved to Florida from someone else? From somewhere else? A few? Okay, yeah. Where are some other places that you guys have lived besides Florida? Just throw it out. Yeah.
Canada.
Canada. Cool.
Illinois.
Illinois, okay.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. In the back, somewhere. Anyone?
Elgin, Illinois.
Illinois, okay. Way in the back.
Ukraine.
Ukraine. So cool. Amazing. So all over the world. Man, I just have to say, you guys are so well, what's the word? Behaved. So like, they won't even say something until I call on them. That is impressive, you guys. Good job. I'm telling you, homeschooling works. It's amazing. So, yeah, I was born in California. I've lived all over the country. But when COVID happened, Florida had a different experience than other places. There were still some problems here, but where I was living in California and New York and other places in the country, life was very difficult and very confusing, and people were not behaving well at all. And I'm not talking about kids, I'm talking about parents. The adults were not behaving well in a lot of places. And so when COVID happened, my life got basically turned upside down. And everyone's life, I think, somewhat got turned upside down when COVID happened. But my life kind of especially did. I had actually been working overseas in Asia, and I had just went back to the States right before COVID happened, and I was planning to fly back overseas to continue my work. And I wasn't able to do that when COVID happened. They shut down all the flights, and then they basically tried to shut down life. They shut down schools for kids. They shut down many, many different businesses and jobs for adults that are trying to work and provide for their families. They shut down churches, right? And literally said, you can't go to church and worship, or you have to do it in the parking lot on a radio, or, I mean, just ridiculous things. So when that happened, I remembered what I learned when I was homeschooling. I remembered what I had learned growing up in my family with my parents and my siblings. I remembered basic things that are really important, but now all of a sudden I had to use what I learned. Because what was happening all around me when COVID happened was people were saying things that did not make sense and did not line up with what I know is true. Right? And how did I know what was true? Well, because I know that truth originally comes from God and His Word. That's where truth comes from. So, as you get older and you go through life, when you run into situations or you run into people that will say things to you, and if you think about what they're saying and you realize this doesn't make sense, it doesn't line up with what I know is true from God and from what I've read in His Word in the Bible, and hopefully from the things that my parents and my homeschool and church community helped me to learn and to think through as I was growing up. And in this case, I'm confident that you guys have great parents and a great church and a great homeschool community to help you learn what God says in the Bible and what He's taught us through people over the years, when you're studying history and when you're studying science and math and English and all those important subjects. But you learn those things so that you know how to think and you know what's true and you know where truth comes from. And then when you get in situations in your life and you run into things that don't make sense and they don't line up, that's when you have an opportunity to decide, how am I going to respond? What choices am I gonna make in my life? In a circumstance, in a situation where people are telling me things that don't line up with what God and the Bible says. And they don't line up with things that my parents and my teachers have been teaching me consistently, the same way over and over. So I got into a situation like that when COVID happened. And so I had to make difficult decisions. And basically what happened was I started to speak out publicly to criticize bad behavior and bad decisions that a lot of people around me were making and were doing. COVID was happening, they were shutting life down. There was also a lot of protest and violence in the streets all around the whole country, and this happened in Los Angeles where I lived at the time. So there were people that were vandalizing businesses, burning them to the ground. People were actually getting killed. It was a very, very dangerous, violent time. And there were a lot of adults and even people in positions of leadership, whether we're talking about government officials or school officials, and etc., various types of leaders that were excusing this kind of behavior and saying, no, it's okay, and it's, and I knew that's not true. It's just not true. I knew that was a total contradiction. It did not make sense. It did not line up with the truth that I know comes from God and what I read in the Bible. So I started to speak publicly about that. And of course, at this time in my life, I was working as an actor in Hollywood in California, and they are not at all, they are not living their lives and operating based on the truth that comes from God and His Word. In fact, many times in places like Hollywood, they are doing the opposite of that, and it causes a lot of problems. So when I started speaking out against that, that caused me trouble in my life where I had a lot of people not want to work with me or fire me from jobs or opportunities to work. So that was a difficult decision for me because I had worked for years in my life to build a career, which is a very difficult career to do, working as an artist, as an actor and a musician and all of these things. But I came to a point in my life where, like I said, I had a choice to either do what was comfortable or to stand up for what I know is true, because I know the source of that truth is coming from God in the Bible. So I made those difficult decisions, and they cost me a lot. They cost me a lot of pain. They cost me a lot of opportunity. But I had to trust in God, and I did, that He was going to lead me in a path that He wanted me to take. Because of those decisions, I ended up starting to work for a nonprofit organization that some of you may have heard called America's Frontline Doctors. Really courageous group of doctors and lawyers that stood up when COVID was going crazy and people were being told a lot of lies and false information, and also when they were being told that they couldn't go to work and couldn't go to school and couldn't go to church, which is never okay, and it's certainly never legal in America. So we stood up to fight against those things, and that's why she mentioned that I'm a patriot, and that's where that comes from. But I am a patriot because I know what America is as a nation. I know that it is a place and a people, but a specific place and a specific people of citizens, meaning that you legally live in this nation, in this country, the United States of America, and there are laws that we all agree to that protect us and that give us a direction for how to live our lives in an orderly way so that we have a safe and healthy society. And without those laws and those rules, things go crazy. They go to chaos. And that was what I was talking about in 2020 when there were violent protests in the streets and people were burning buildings down. That's what happens when you lose the rule of law, when you lose the protections of laws and an organized civil society. So I started working for America's Frontline Doctors, and in 2020, you guys remember COVID happened, right? Do you remember something very important that happened at the end of 2020? Anyone? So in the beginning of 2020, COVID happened. They shut down the schools, they shut down everything. Throughout the course of that year, it didn't really get better. In the summer of 2020 is when the frontline doctors stood on the steps of the Supreme Court in the white coats, and that was really a big deal. But then the fall and winter of that year, going into the end of 2020, does anybody remember something very important that happened?
Biden was elected.
In a manner of speaking. Right before that,
January 6th.
oh, but right before January 6th. What happened on November, I think it was November 3rd of 2020? So they say that Biden was elected, but what I believe, and many, many people in the country believe, and this was 4 years ago, so over time we've had a lot more evidence to come out that supports this belief. But we believe that the presidential election in 2020 was stolen. That's a big deal, you guys. Stealing is wrong, right? We know that. Stealing anything is wrong. But the idea of certain people doing things that are illegal and inappropriate in order to steal an election from the entire country that we all are a part of, that is stealing at a level that you don't usually even come across that. It's very unusual. It's very, very serious. And a lot of people, even when it happened, millions of people around the country understood that there was a lot of evidence of fraud and illegal in inappropriate behavior by adults, by people in the government, by people that were supposed to be in charge of how an election is handled. And so there were a lot of complaints, and I certainly was one of the people complaining about that, because if you don't have a legal, valid election, you start to lose the entire system. That, again, when I talked about the importance of the rule of law and laws and having a system that's orderly so that we can all be secure and safe and healthy and live good lives. So when the election was stolen in 2020, that was a very serious attack on the integrity of our national system as Americans. So I was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th of 2021, which is of course just a couple months after the stolen election in November of 2020. And that's where my story gets really crazy. Because I don't know if you guys know anything about January 6th, 2021. There's a whole lot of information and people telling stories about it in the news and all over the world. And a lot of it is dishonest and confusing and not truthful, but very much like COVID, right? So it takes a lot of work and a lot of critical thinking to determine what they're telling you actually happened on January 6th. And the more you grow up and listen to like what people are saying is happening in the world around you, the more you will realize you have to be very careful and think through, because a lot of people are saying a lot of different things and they don't match up. Like telling you, someone's telling you the sky is blue and another person's coming up and telling you, no, the sky is green. And I mean, of course you're thinking, well, blue and green are different, I know that. So the sky can't be blue and green, right? Or no? Do you think it can be blue or green? Probably not. So January 6th, I won't tell you too much about that day. There's a lot of crazy things that happened. But what happened to me is that I was in Washington, D.C., because that's the capital of our nation, right? It's the chief city where we have our top government leaders meet in order to decide what laws are going to govern or kind of give a structure for our whole nation to live and to operate, hopefully in a safe, orderly manner. So that's the place that people go to if they have questions, concerns, or complaints about their government, which of course I had a very serious concern and complaint about the government, and millions of people did. So there were 1 million people, at least, I think actually quite a bit more than 1 million people in Washington, D.C. that day on January 6th. And some interesting things happened, and 12 days later, after January 6th, I was back home at that time in California, and I got assaulted by an FBI SWAT team, which is, I don't know if you've heard or seen anything about an FBI SWAT team, but it's the police, but they almost look like a military unit where they're all dressed up in all black gear with machine guns, and it looks like they're going to assault a dangerous enemy. But in this case, they assaulted me, a citizen, just in an apartment in a downtown safe city in California. And they threw me in jail. And for 4 days I was in jail without a phone call or any clue where I was or what was happening. My family had no idea where I went. This is incredibly dangerous, shocking kind of behavior to happen in America. To a person who is not a criminal and has done nothing violent or anything that, yeah, go ahead.
What did you eat in prison?
That's a great question. Man, it was lousy food. It was not good. Yeah, I ate whatever they shoved through a slot in the door on a tray. So, yeah, I was, like once a week we got chicken. That was...
Really chicken?
Yeah. In that case, it was still on the bone, so you could tell it was actually chicken. That's the only decent food I got in prison the whole time, is once a week they had chicken on a bone. So you looked forward to that. Because everything else was like fake processed food out of a package.
Stale bread?
Yeah. That kind of stuff. Rice.
Sunday pancakes?
Sunday pancakes? No?
Actually, they do have Sunday pancakes sometimes. They're not exactly good, but you still like, oh, they're pancakes. So you kind of pretend you're human. I did not have that in the first time, but in the jail the first time. But I was in jail for 4 days. Then I got out. Then I had to go to court, and then I had to decide if I was going to stand up for what was true or for what was comfortable. This is what the young man mentioned when I asked, yeah, you kind of knew this. So they threw me in jail. They accused me of all of these very terrible things. They charged me with crimes, some really serious crimes, including a 20-year felony crime. Insane. And go ahead, you have a question?
Did you hate the food?
Yeah. Hating the food is not an overstatement. It is a true thing. The food was terrible. And I'm Italian, I love good food. So good food is very important to me. So I was very frustrated with how bad the food was, but everything was bad in prison. Prison is a very, very bad place. Go ahead.
Did they give you any water?
Yes, they did give you water.
They had to keep them alive too.
They have to keep you alive or they don't get paid. So, but I got out of jail the first time, went to court, and I had to decide, how am I going to handle this situation? Because the government now has arrested me, has treated me very, very terribly, and they're charging me with a 20-year felony and a bunch of other crimes. I didn't commit any of those crimes. I was innocent. I did nothing wrong. I knew that for sure. I took a lot of time to think about what happened that day. What did I actually do? What am I responsible for as an adult? Because I'm an adult, I'm going to take responsibility for what I do. But I am not going to be pressured by anyone, even the government, to say that I did something that I didn't do. And that's what the government wanted me to do. The government wanted me to admit to a crime that I didn't commit. They wanted me to sign my name to a whole story, like a whole packet of papers with a written description of what the government said was going on that day on January 6th. But I didn't, what they wrote down on those papers was wrong. It was false. It was full of lies. I marked them all down with a pen. So I decided I am not going to sign this and agree to that story because it's false. And they're telling that false story for a reason. They were telling that false story in order to betray and in order to frame not just me, but a bunch of other American citizens that I consider my countrymen, that I consider my American family. They were trying to frame all of those people as criminals when the vast majority of them were totally innocent, just like I was. Go ahead.
What were the crimes?
Man, okay, smart audience. Good job. Good job, teachers. It's pretty technical, but I'll give you a quick summary. I was charged with 5 charges. One of them was basically referred to as trespassing, being in an area that is restricted and you're not supposed to be. I wasn't actually guilty of that because that law requires a couple of different things. One being that the area that's restricted is marked so that people know that it's restricted, and that didn't happen. The area that they were saying was restricted was the Capitol building and the plaza in front of the Capitol, which is open to the public 365 days a year. So everyone had the obvious expectation, of course we're allowed to be here, everyone's here every day. So they didn't actually follow their own rules to even say that I committed the crime of trespass, which is a small crime in and of itself. It's just being in a place that you're not supposed to be. So I didn't actually commit trespass, but that's one of the crimes they charged me with. They charged me with other crimes that are more serious. One of them was disorderly or disruptive conduct, which means I would have needed to have been shoving somebody or doing something pretty physical and violent. I did nothing of the sort, and it's all on video, so you know that for sure. The big crime they charged me with, the 20-year felony, we're getting really technical. Is that okay for a quick second? Okay. They call it obstruction of justice, basically to say, we're charging you for the crime of doing something to try to prevent the government from upholding the law. What's ironic is that we're seeing really violent stuff happening in Minnesota. If you guys see the news at all in the last few weeks in Minnesota, there have been people in the streets violently trying to stop law enforcement from doing their job. There's a famous video went around all over social media where a guy like roundhouse kicked the taillight of a police car, of a police SUV. I don't know if you saw that video. Anyway, That's obstructing justice. I, of course, didn't do those things, but they charged me with a 20-year felony of obstructing justice, but the title of the charge of the statute was tampering with a witness, victim, or informant. So a 20-year prison felony that was titled tampering with a witness. That's what they charged me for. Now, tampering with a witness would mean if you have a trial going on where someone is suing someone else or someone is being charged with a crime, and then there is a witness, which is a person who had some knowledge of what happened or they saw something. So then in the trial, they testify, they give a story about, I saw this happen. That would be a witness. So if someone tries to frighten or threaten that witness and tell them, if you tell the truth, I'm going to hurt your family, because they want that person not to tell the truth in the court, that would be very serious, right? And that would be obstructing justice. So that's why that law exists. It's a valid law. It's just that it had absolutely nothing to do with John Strand, me, or what I did that day. Like, it had no connection whatsoever. It was totally irrelevant. But they just used it because it had 20 years of prison attached to it. So that's the technical part of that. But the bottom line is, I was in a position where the government wanted me to tell a lie, and a very serious lie that was going to put not just myself, but a lot of other Americans in danger and ruin their lives. But if I didn't tell that lie, the government was going to crush me with a 20-year felony and put me in prison for years. And I had to decide that I believe there's never a right time to do the wrong thing. So I refused that lie and decided to go to trial and go to prison, knowing that they were going to put me in prison because they were not honest people, and it was a corrupted situation in the court system. Go ahead.
What was the lie and what was the truth?
The lie they wanted me to say was that I was guilty and that I had committed this 20-year crime of obstructing justice. They wanted me to say that I knew in advance before I got there on January 6th that I already knew there was a plan to commit a crime, to overthrow the government specifically, a very serious crime. They wanted me to say that was our plan. And so we knew before we got there that we were going to break the law. So that's a lie, because that wasn't the plan at all. The plan was to do what we were supposed to do, which was to exercise our First Amendment right, meaning not to commit a crime, but actually do what the law specifically says we are allowed to do, to go to Washington, D.C. and protest, simply to stand there and say, excuse me, government, but the election was stolen. You need to look into that. You need to at least double check what happened and give a report to the American people and prove to us that you did your job correctly, because we have a lot of evidence to show that you didn't do it correctly, and that, we have a right to demand an answer. Go ahead.
Did you ever meet Trump?
Not yet. Well, I met him like in a room full of people, but not privately myself. Yes.
Weren't they committing a crime against you?
That's an excellent question, and absolutely they were. And I'm currently in the midst of a lawsuit against the government for what they did to me. So we'll see how that goes. Go ahead.
Did they end up putting you in jail?
Yes. Good. Thank you. So I had to make the choice between the truth or a lie, right? So I chose the truth, even though I knew they'd put me in prison, and they did. They tried to put me in prison for 8 years at my sentencing. And then they put me in prison, and I wasn't sure how long I'd be in there. I thought I'd be in there for years and years. But since I didn't take the lie, I pled not guilty at trial. And in America, you have rights, which are very important. And one of those rights is you have the right to plead not guilty if you believe you're not guilty. And if you are convicted at trial, the judge or the jury says you are guilty, but you know you're not, you have the right to appeal, which means to bring the case back to a higher court, a different court, and say, court, this other court convicted me, but I'm not guilty, and I have evidence to prove it, so I need you to check their work. I need you to check why they called me guilty when I know I'm not guilty and I have evidence to prove that I'm innocent. And you have the opportunity, you have the right to exercise that another court takes a second look to see if they made a mistake. So I exercised that right, and praise be to Jesus, I won at the Supreme Court. I actually went straight to the Supreme Court, which is very unusual. It's a miracle. That was God at work. Yeah. Went straight to the Supreme Court and was vindicated. And then I was released from prison after serving exactly 1 year. In fact, it was 366 days because it was a leap year. Questions? Go ahead. You were born in a leap year. Awesome. Go ahead.
Did you ever meet Charlie Kirk?
Yes. Yes, Charlie is a friend and a hero to me. And I actually had Charlie on my podcast show that I was doing for a few years, which was really exciting. So he spent a couple of minutes with me on that show. And then when I got arrested for January 6th, and I decided to stand up for the truth and go to prison on principle so that you don't have to, when I made that choice, Charlie actually invited me onto his show right before I was going to go into prison. So I went on his show and we talked about the story about what had led me to January 6th and how I had gotten arrested and put in prison. And Charlie was very concerned about what was happening because he understood that January 6th was a complicated event that involved a lot of government abuse and government crimes, and that a lot of innocent people were being persecuted, including me. Then I went to prison for a year. Then I won at the Supreme Court and got released. And then Charlie had me back on his show to talk about that story and the big victory that we had. And so that was really, really exciting for me to see Charlie again and share that with him. And then, of course, more recently we lost Charlie, which was a huge tragedy. And I was very, very hurt and affected by that, I think, as most Americans were. But he is a hero to me, and Charlie gave me a lot of inspiration that I hope that I can share with you guys, and that you guys will kind of take Charlie Kirk's inspiration and share it with other people that you're going to be meeting, because that's how we change the world according to what God told us in the Bible. And Charlie Kirk always reminded us that in the Bible it says that we are called to be salt and light, which means that we change the environment that's around us, right? Like light brings visibility to dark places, so you're no longer blind if the light comes into a dark room. And salt preserves food that it doesn't spoil, right? And salt it brings flavor to things and it preserves things. And so that's how God wants us to be in the world and in the midst of other people. Was there a question? Any? Go ahead.
What was Charlie like?
Oh man, these are thoughtful questions. Charlie was thoughtful and respectful and also very strong all at the same time. Yeah, he was very thoughtful and very kind. He loved people, but he was very strong, and he did not allow his desire to love people or other people's desire to love people. He did not allow that to confuse him or to bring his guard down when there was a question about the truth. Because you can't love people without the truth. And a lot of people try to confuse and deceive us into thinking that we can love people without the truth, and it's a lie, and you won't love them, you'll actually hurt them. Charlie Kirk knew that, so he would always defend the truth, even while he was kind and working to love people. Go ahead, in the back.
It's not a question, but I really love your speech and I found it very interesting.
I appreciate that a lot. I love feedback, and I'm still pretty young, certainly in the realm that I'm starting to work in. I've been working as an actor and a musician and all these things for my whole career. And ever since I went to prison and then got out, I have realized that God is calling me in a very interesting, different direction in my life that I never expected. So I'm actually running for Congress here in Florida. If you are familiar at all, which you may not be, but the congressman for this district where we live, from Marco Island through Naples all the way to Fort Myers and Cape Coral, that district is Florida 19, and the congressman for that district is Byron Donalds. His wife Byron's wife, Erica Donalds, is an amazing woman and a champion for school choice. So she's a big supporter of homeschooling and charter schools and alternative schooling. So she has done a lot of work to support what's happening here, which is amazing. So Byron and Erica Donalds are awesome people, and Byron is the congressman now, but he is leaving that seat because he's running to be the next governor of the state of Florida, which is very exciting, and I believe Byron will make an awesome governor. And that leaves his seat in Congress for this district open, and so I'm running for that seat, which is very amazing to me because I just never expected that that's where my life would go. But now God's given me an opportunity to use what I learned in homeschooling and learned as an actor and a musician and learned as a patriot fighting against a stolen election in the government and going to prison and all of these things that I've experienced. God's given me a chance to use that going forward to run for Congress. So thank you. Go ahead.
What movies are you in?
That's a great question. I am in some independent films that you probably have never heard of. One of them is called Just Missed, which is a very cool story that I was a lead in. As an actor, I worked more in television than movies, on the more mainstream side or things that you might be familiar with. So you may have heard of, there's a show on the Discovery Channel called True Crime. Yeah, which is recounts crimes that have happened. So I was the lead on an episode of True Crime where I actually played a serial killer. It's a weird story. And you know, when I went to prison, when I actually went to prison in my real life, when you get to prison, all the inmates that are there, most of them have been in prison their whole life. That's just sad, but unfortunately that's the kind of life that they've had. So they rarely get out, or they get out and they go right back in. So when you're in prison, everyone thinks you've always been in prison forever. So when you get to a new prison, because there's prisons all over the country, and they shuffle them around. So when you get to a new spot, the inmates always say, "Where'd you come from? Like, which prison did you come from?" And they were kind of confused when I kept telling them, "I've never been to prison before. I'm not actually a criminal, although I do play one on TV." So yeah, True Crime is a show I did, and a bunch of other television shows and independent movies and things like that. Go ahead.
Have you ever met anyone related to Trump?
Yeah, his son Eric Trump I've met several times. And his son Don Jr. I actually got a chance to speak with Don Jr. in Texas about a year ago, which was really awesome. Don Jr. is awesome. He is bold and exciting, and Don Jr. inspires me a lot too. So I love the Trumps. This is an amazing family.
Does Don Jr. sound like Trump?
In some ways, he does. You can tell he's President Trump's son, but he's definitely got his own angle. He's unique. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, since you're running for Congress District 19.
Yeah.
Madison Cawthorn is, and are you guys friends? Could you speak to that relationship?
What a great question. Yeah. So Madison Cawthorn is also homeschooled.
Yes.
Has he come to speak with you? Oh, awesome. Yes. So Madison and I are good friends, and Madison has actually been an inspiration to me. He got involved in government sooner than I did. He's been doing it for years, and he's actually served previously in Congress in a different state. So we are friends, and he's inspired me in different ways. And so we are currently running against each other in this race, in this district. I know, which is kind of unfortunate. And you know, I didn't realize he was going to run for this seat quite at first. I was thinking I was going to run for a different race, like a state house position. We actually had a lawyer come into the prison, and I signed paperwork in my prison jumpsuit to run for office when I first decided I'm going to run for office. We didn't even know if I was going to get out of jail yet. So we were planning to run a campaign from prison. You can actually do that; it's legal. And then what happened was when we won at the Supreme Court and I got released, I got out, and as soon as I saw my family, my team, I said, "Okay, what's the story with that race that we were preparing for?" They said, "Oops, there was a consultant on the ground who was supposed to file some paperwork, and he made a mistake, and he missed a deadline. So we actually can't run for that seat." But we'd already done all of this work to prepare, like changing my whole life to run for political office. And I really believed God was calling me to do that. So then shortly after I heard Byron was going to open his seat in Congress in Florida 19. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I already live in this district. And that's a very important position And Congress, in my opinion, is, I think, the most important single place where we need to radically transform the current culture, because it is deeply corrupt and full of cowardice. And we need men of courage and faith to get back into Congress specifically and return our country back to the fundamentals of freedom. That's what I believe. And so that's what I'm running to do. And when I realized that Florida 19 was open, and I lived there, and God had brought me through this incredible story, I really believed it was his time and his path for me to run for this seat. But before I actually filed to run for Florida 19, I spent as much time as I could, about a year, getting involved in the local community. I actually became elected as a precinct committeeman in my county, in Collier County, for the Republican Executive Committee. And I started meeting and talking with various people in the community that are involved in politics already, and asking them, would you want me to run for this seat? For this seat, even though Madison Cawthorn is also running, and actually 10 or so other people are running, a whole bunch of people are running. And Madison is running, and I respect Madison and appreciate him as a friend. But I had a lot of people say, no, we want you to run. We really believe that you are a specific, uniquely situated person right now in this time and place to bring the testimony that you have, the character that it is required to take prison, to choose prison over a lie, and to resist the pressure of Washington, D.C., and bring that to Washington and really change the culture. So I heard a lot of people say they wanted me to do that, and I believe that that was what God was calling me to do, and so I made the decision to file for that race. And so now we're working as hard as we can to meet people and share the story, and really not just share my story, but inspire all of you guys, from young kids in school to high school and college, to your parents, to your grandparents, to everyone. Really inspire you that we have a unique opportunity and a responsibility to get involved in our government and take our country back. And it's been lost for actually a long time. So we'll talk more about that on the campaign trail, but I am excited to inspire all of you guys to understand that America is your country. It belongs to you. It's a gift God has given you. And when he gives us gifts, he also gives us responsibility to protect those gifts and to manage them, or to steward them. Stewardship is an important idea in the Bible that I'm sure your parents are going to be teaching you about. So I hope that was a good answer to that question for you. Any other questions?
Last question.
Last question. Gosh, no, not technically. I was not accused of murder. Yeah. Oh, well, maybe in TV. Yes. In real life, I was not charged with murder, but I was charged with a 20-year felony. And there are people that have actually committed murder that go to jail for less than 20 years. So, sadly, so I was charged with a crime that is pretty much close to being as serious as murder, at least in a certain sense. So it was a very serious charge that I was facing, and that the government brought against me falsely and wrongfully. So that was it was scary. It was very difficult. It was very painful. But the most important thing in my life, I'll close with this for you guys, is my relationships. Remember, I was telling you that my dad told me that relationships are what really matter and what I'll remember when I get older. And my most important relationship is with Jesus. Because, I mean, Jesus is God, and he's the reason that I even exist, and he's the reason that I have hope for an amazing future. And every one of you guys in this room has hope for an amazing future. And it's not just hope like, oh, I hope that happens. No, the Bible says that that hope is a confident expectation, that we believe it is going to happen because God promised that it will happen, and God is faithful, and he always delivers on his promises. He never fails. Men will always fail you. Even I am human, and I make mistakes, and I failed myself, and I've failed my family. But God is gracious to forgive us when we turn to him, and he heals those mistakes, and he promises us that he will never fail us. So my relationship with Jesus is the most important thing in my life, and
It has always been important to me. My family raised me to know the truth of the word and to develop a relationship with Jesus when I was your age, 5, 6 years old, when I first developed my relationship with Christ. And I was baptized at probably 11 years old, I think. But I have grown with every passing day and year in my life. I grow closer to Jesus, and I understand more and more about not only how important, but how beautiful and rewarding it is to have Jesus as your friend and your Lord and your Savior, and the kind of amazing life that he has for you if you accept him and listen to him and lean into what he has for you. So thank you so much for having me here to share my story, you guys. I am amazed by how intelligent and well-behaved and thoughtful that you guys are. I think it's beautiful and very exciting. I am so excited to be running for Congress to defend Americans like you guys. And you are what I'm fighting for when I get up and go to work every day. And I'm just proud and honored and thankful to be here with you and to be a part of this. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Let's sit on this stand and thank the God and Patriot for coming today to inspire you.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. Great questions, by the way.
You guys did a great job. We're gonna go ahead and sit